My father-in-law set the folder on the kitchen table, the way men set down things they think are final, flat, deliberate, like a gavel. "We think you should read this before Sunday," he said. My wife was still in the hallway taking off her coat. She didn't hear it. I did. I looked at the folder but didn't open it. I already knew what kind of document gets delivered like that. Not with a handshake, not with a conversation, with a surface and a silence that expects you to flinch first. I didn't touch it. My name is Garrett Webb. I'm 32 years old, and for the past 4 years, I've been married to the woman I love. Her name is Nina, and for almost all of that time, her parents have believed I was a quiet man with modest ambitions and a mid-level job in commercial real estate, a guy who showed up to holidays with decent wine and didn't say much, harmless, forgettable. What they didn't know, what nobody in that family knew, except Nina, and even she only knew part of it, was that the property management firm her father had worked for since before we met, the company that gave him his title and his pension, and the parking spot he brought up at Thanksgiving, was a subsidiary, and the parent company that owned it outright, that held the lease agreements, that signed off on every expansion and every hire for the past 6 years? I built it. With 2 partners and a line of credit and 4 years of barely sleeping. I built it from nothing into something, and then I stayed quiet about it because that's how I'm wired. I don't need a room to know I own it. But that folder on the table told me something had changed. Someone had started connecting dots. Nina came into the kitchen, looked at me, looked at the folder, looked at her father. "What's this?" she asked. "Just some things we thought Garrett should be aware of," her mother said from the doorway. She had that tone. The one that sounds like concern, but is shaped like a warning. I pulled out a chair and sat down. "Go ahead," her father said, nodding at the folder. I opened it. Inside was a printed summary. 3 pages. Looked like something a private researcher would put together. With my name at the top. Corporate filings. Property records. A few photographs of me walking into an office building downtown. A note at the bottom, handwritten. "Does Nina know who she's really married to?" I read it slowly. All of it. Then I closed the folder and set my hands flat on the table. "Where'd you get this?" I asked. Her father straightened. "That's not the point. It kind of is." Nina picked up the folder. I watched her face as she scanned the first page. Her eyes stopped somewhere in the middle. She turned to me. "Garrett." "I know," I said. "Is this true?" I looked at her directly. Most of it, her mother, stepped fully into the kitchen. "We hired someone because we were worried. A parent worries. Nina has always been." "Careful," I said. Not loud. Just placed it there. She stopped. I turned back to my wife. "I was going to tell you everything. I've been trying to figure out the right time for about 8 months. Not because I was hiding it from you, because I didn't want the money to be the reason you saw me differently." "How much?" Nina asked. I told her the number. The kitchen went very quiet. Her father sat down for the first time since I'd arrived. "Here's what you need to understand about how I got here, because it matters. I grew up in a small town in eastern Ohio. My dad worked at a lumber yard. My mom cleaned houses on Thursdays and Saturdays. We weren't poor. The way people mean when they say poor dramatically. But we were the kind of family that checked the bank balance before buying groceries, and knew exactly how much a gallon of milk cost at 3 different stores. I learned early that money is something you track, and something you respect, and something you do not talk about. At tables, where you haven't earned the right to sit. I went to a state school on partial scholarship. Studied business, because it seemed practical. Worked construction summers to cover what the scholarship didn't. When I graduated, I took an entry-level leasing job at a small commercial property company and spent 4 years learning everything about how real estate actually works. Not the textbook version, but the real version, which involves knowing which landlords are bleeding cash and which properties have untapped value sitting underneath bad management. By 26, I had identified 3 undervalued office parks in the Mid-Atlantic corridor. By 28, I had a partner, a plan, and a lender who believed in the numbers. By 30, I had a company with 11 properties and a management division that handled third-party accounts for 14 others. One of those third-party accounts was a firm called Ardent Properties Group, which is where my future father-in-law had been a senior facilities director for 9 years. I met Nina at a mutual friend's birthday dinner, not through work. She had no idea who I was. She just thought I was a guy in construction who wore the same kind of boots every day and always seemed slightly distracted, which was accurate. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. I told her I did well. I told her I owned a share of the company I worked for. I didn't tell her the scale, partly because I was still scaling it, partly because I watched too many things change. The moment numbers entered a room, and I had spent years working for something real. And I didn't want money to be the gravity that held us together. But the other reason, the one I didn't say out loud, even to myself for a long time, was her father. I knew who he was before she introduced me. I didn't tell her that either. When she brought me home for the first time and he shook my hand and said, "So you're in real estate." With that particular flatness, that meant he'd already decided what category I fit in. I made a choice to let it sit. I wanted to see the man clearly. Not the version he performed for a son-in-law who might impress him. The version he was, when the math said I was beneath him. And over 3 years of holidays and dinners, and a wedding he helped plan, and a renovation he offered opinions about without being asked. I got a pretty complete picture. He was the kind of man who led with his title, who used the name of his company the way other men use a firm handshake, who made comments about my car being practical and our apartment being cozy, with a smile that meant something else. Who told Nina once, she told me later, quietly, like she was embarrassed, that she could have aimed a little higher. I didn't get angry. I got patient. But that folder changed the timeline. Nina set it down and looked at her parents. "You hired someone to investigate my husband." Her mother started. "We were protecting. You were collecting evidence," Nina said. Her voice wasn't raised. That was what surprised me. "For what? What were you planning to do with this?" Her father cleared his throat. "We wanted to have a conversation, adult to adult, about what Garrett's role actually is. Because if he has the kind of influence you're suggesting," he gestured at the folder, "then there are things we deserve to know, as a family." "What kind of things?" I asked. He looked at me steadily. "Whether decisions have been made that should have been disclosed." I understood what he meant. He was thinking about his job. About whether my position in the company that managed his company created some kind of conflict of interest, or some kind of leverage I'd been quietly holding. He was trying to figure out if he should be scared of me. "Your employment has never been touched," I said. "Not once. I don't involve myself in personnel at the operational level. You were hired before I took on Ardent as a client. You've been evaluated by people who don't know who I am, and your tenure has had nothing to do with me." He blinked. "I know your bonus structure for the last 4 years," I continued. "I know your performance reviews, because they filter up eventually. You're good at your job. That's why you still have it." Nina's mother sat down slowly. "I wasn't keeping this from your daughter to manipulate anyone," I said. "I kept it because I wanted a marriage, not an arrangement. I wanted Nina to choose me, not the portfolio." Nina was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "How long have you known who my dad worked for?" "Before the birthday dinner." She absorbed that. "And you didn't think that was something to mention?" "I thought about it every month for 2 years," I said. "And then I thought about how it would land, what it would do to every conversation we'd ever have after I made a bad call." "I know that." She nodded once, stood up, picked up her coat. "Okay," she said to her parents. "We're going." Her father stood. "Nina, this is exactly the kind of thing You hired someone to dig up information on my husband," she said, turning to face him. "And then you brought it to the kitchen table like it was an ambush. That's what you did. We're your parents. I know who you are." She looked at me. "Let's go." We drove home without speaking for the first 10 minutes. The city slid past the windows in the usual way it does at night, all lit up and indifferent. Nina spoke first. "Were you ever going to tell me?" "Yes." "When?" "When I stopped being afraid it would change how you look at me." She turned toward the window. "That's the part I don't know how to hold right now. Not the money, the fear. I didn't try to fill it. She was right to sit with it. I had made her believe something incomplete for years. Not with lies exactly, but with careful silences. And there's a kind of dishonesty in that money doesn't fix. "I'm sorry," I said. "I should have trusted you sooner." She didn't say it was okay. I didn't need her to. What happened next unfolded over about 2 weeks, and I'll be straightforward. It was uncomfortable in the way that things are when a structure that's been quietly holding a lot of weight finally becomes visible. Her father called me the following Monday, not to apologize, to ask for a meeting. "Professional context," he said. I said I'd have my assistant find a time. That landed differently than he expected. We met at my actual office, which I'd never brought him to. He came in and looked at the floor, and the view, and the conference table, and the framed property maps on the wall, the way people look at rooms that reframe everything. They thought they understood. I offered him coffee. He declined. He sat across from me, and for the first time since I'd known him, he didn't have an opening. He just sat there. I waited, finally. "I want to understand what your intentions are, with the company, with my position." "Your position is secure," I said. I meant what I said. That's not going to change. "And Nina?" "Nina is my wife. That's also not going to change." He looked at his hands. "I wasn't kind to you." "No." I thought. "I know what you thought," I said. "I let you think it." He looked up. "Why?" "Because I wanted to know who you were when you didn't think it mattered." He was quiet for a long time. The kind of quiet that means something is shifting. Not for dramatic effect, just because reality has arrived and there's no argument to make against it. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "Nothing," I said. "I want you to be good to your daughter. I want you to stop measuring people by how loud their life looks. That's it." He nodded slowly. He didn't say he was sorry that day. That came 3 weeks later, at dinner, with Nina present, in a sentence that was short and plainly spoken. And all the better for it. I accepted it the way it was given, without ceremony. The hardest conversation was the one I had with Nina, the night after my meeting with her father. We sat on the back porch after dinner, and she asked me to explain it from the beginning. Not the business parts, the other parts. Why I had made the choices I made. I told her about growing up watching money determine what people thought of my family, about watching my parents be invisible in rooms where other people were loud, about deciding early that I would build something, but that I would build it without making it the first thing in the room when I walked in. She listened to all of it. Then she said, "I'm not them." "I know," I said. "I married you in our living room in front of 17 people, because I wanted to, not because of anything you owned. I know that too. Then you should have told me." She wasn't angry when she said it. Just clear. "You should have trusted me with the whole thing." "You're right." She leaned back and looked at the sky. "We have these old string lights above the porch that we hung 2 summers ago, when we were going to have people over, and then didn't, and they've just stayed there." She was looking at them. "I don't care about the money," she said. "For the record, I actually find the whole thing a little overwhelming." I smiled. "It's overwhelming for me too sometimes. But I care about you thinking you needed to protect me from knowing the real version of our life." "That's fair." She turned to look at me. "Is there anything else?" "No," I said. "That's all of it." She studied me for a moment the way she does when she's deciding whether to believe something. Then she nodded. "Okay," she said. "Okay." We sat out there for another hour without saying much. The lights above us buzzed softly. Somewhere down the street, a dog was barking at something, only it could see. There is a version of this story where I end up at some dramatic podium moment, where everyone in the room finally understands what I represent, and the scales tip, and some great justice descends. That's not really how it went. What actually happened is smaller and more true. I stopped hiding something that didn't need to be hidden. My wife had a hard couple of weeks, and then chose me again. Her father started greeting me differently. Not warmly exactly, but honestly, which I prefer. And the company kept running, because that's what companies do. I did make one change at work that had nothing to do with any of this. I had been carrying a low-level contractor role that one of my partners had quietly eliminated 6 months earlier, without flagging it to me, a cost-cutting measure that I thought was short-sighted. I since dated it, and added a second position. That's the kind of decision that doesn't make news, but matters to the two people it affects. Everything else stayed the same. I'm still the same guy who drinks his coffee plain and wears the same rotation of 4 shirts and checks the weather twice every morning, even though I always pack wrong for it. Nina still leaves cabinet doors open. Her dad still has opinions. Her mom still calls on Sunday mornings at a time that makes no sense. The folder is gone. I think Nina threw it away. Neither of us has mentioned it. Last month we were at dinner with her parents. A real dinner, not an ambush, and her father said something about a property development he'd been reading about. He turned to me and asked what I thought. Not performatively. Actually asked. I told him. He disagreed on one point. We went back and forth for a few minutes. It was the most real conversation we'd ever had. Nina caught my eye across the table. I didn't need to say anything. Neither did she. Some things only become visible in the rear view. The man I was before that folder landed on the kitchen table was doing something that felt like protection, but was really just control. Of the story, of the timing, of the way I got to be seen. I thought if I managed the information carefully enough, I could make sure the right things mattered to the right people. I couldn't. Of course, you can't. What you can do is be honest with the person you chose, and let them decide what to do with the full picture. That's the part I got wrong. Not the silence itself, but who I was keeping it from. Nina deserved the whole truth from the start, not because she would have handled it differently. Maybe she would have, maybe not, but because a real partnership doesn't have a managed version and a true version. It's just the one version, all the way through. I know that now. I should have known it earlier. The lights are still up on the back porch. We never took them down. At some point, they stopped being left over from a party we didn't have and started just being ours. I don't know exactly when that happened. I think that's how most things work. If you let them,